That's right. Bear down, Bears fans. It's time for another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast, Bears Banter, powered by Second City Gridiron. Bill Zimmerman with you, and we are here. We are at the bye week. The Chicago Bears are 2-2. Pretty good considering where we were 2 weeks ago after that 0-2 start. We're going to talk about it a little bit, where we are at the bye, the quarter poll check-in on the situation on the roster and how people are playing. We're obviously going to talk about that Raiders game and what to take away from it. We're going to talk a little bit thing called hope as well, and the dangerous thing the Chicago Bears are doing to us right now. Now, we're not going to have a guest this week. Podcast will be a little shorter. I'll babble for a while. We will do a mailbox as well, so we'll get those in after the break. But let's jump in, and let's jump in with this Raiders game. Now, I'm going to try and approach this as objectively as I can. And let me start with this statement. When you have a quarterback, and I'm not talking about Caleb Williams, I'm talking about Geno Smith. When you have a quarterback that plays like complete butt, and I don't think there is a better, descriptive term than butt to describe how Geno Smith played. And I said that the previous week on the podcast. What Geno Smith are we getting? Are we getting the 400-yard, 3-touchdown Geno Smith, or the 150-yard, 3-interception Geno Smith? Guess what? We got bad Geno against the Chicago Bears. Now, the Bears did a good job. I'm not saying they didn't cover well. From what I saw, it looked like they did a really good job, but they didn't get a lot of pressure on Geno. Geno did have time to do things, and yet he still delivered that type of performance. And I bring that up to say that if that is the level the quarterback is going to play, and you win the turnover battle as much as you do, that they did in that game, you have to win by double digits. You really have to, right? Like, a good football team goes into that with the opposing quarterback playing like that. That's a 10, that's a 14-point victory. There's no sweating in the fourth quarter. Your feet are up. In fact, that's the type of game that potentially you could win by 20 points. Like that. That's what that game was when Geno Smith turns in that kind of performance. But that didn't happen. So I'm going to look at this a little objectively, and we're going to talk about this team moving forward here in a little bit before we dissect, after we dissect this Raiders game. But we do have to at least acknowledge that the Las Vegas Raiders, and I thought the Raiders were going to be a little bit of a frisky team this year. I thought they had a chance to flirt with the playoffs, be 8-9, 9-8, and they obviously still could be that. It doesn't look like that's where they are right now, largely because of the inconsistent play from the quarterback, who has only turned in one really good game this year, two if you only look at box scores. But that Washington game, he was not good. He was just a fourth quarter garbage time yards merchant in that one. So when we look at this Raiders team, we are looking at a bad football team. We are looking at one of the 10 worst teams in the league. No, they're not the Giants. They're not the Saints. They're not the Panthers. They're not one of these dreadful, dreadful teams. They're not bottom 5, bottom 6, but they are probably bottom 10 in the league. And yes, the game was on the road, but there were a lot of Bears fans there. Bears fans did a hell of a job coming out. And I think that's, I talked about that with Jason Fitz. That's a chronic problem for the Raiders, is that when the Raiders are on an opposing team's schedule and the game is in Las Vegas, the fans circle that and go, road trip, let's go to Vegas. And they flood that stadium because they're going to buy tickets. They're not going out to Vegas without tickets to the game. They're not going to just watch it at the sports book. Not the same way with phone apps and everything. Those sports books don't have the same life. They're still fun. I'm not saying they're not. They don't have the same life they did 10 years ago. So when you're going out to Vegas for the Bears-Raiders game, you're obviously going to the game. So that's a chronic problem the Raiders are going to have moving forward. But Bears fans did a hell of a job showing out for that game. You could hear it on the football broadcast that Bears fans were there. There was at least half the cheers were for the Bears, if not more than half, the way it sounded on the television. So you keep all that in mind. but the Raiders are a bad football team. And if the Bears are a good football team, it's a game you have to win, even if it's on the road. So the fact that it came down to what it came down to, that Caleb Williams had to march them down the field for the game-winning touchdown, that Josh Blackwell had to block a kick. Like, if we're going to be fully objective, it's not great that that's what it took to win. But if we take off the objectivity hat and put on the fan hat, oh, baby, was that a fun victory. That was the kind of victory that gets you excited because the Bears didn't play their best. The defensive line didn't get a pass rush. The offense was not humming the whole game. They settled for a lot of field goals. They were not converting consistently and getting 7 points on the board. It was not cohesive. It was a little clunky. So the fact that that was the situation at hand and that they still pulled that game out, that is a confidence builder. That is a culture builder in that locker room. And that is the type of win that can really start propelling a team moving forward. It may not. A lot of people say the bye week is coming at a great time for the Bears so they can kind of readjust and get ready for Washington in a couple of weeks here. I don't know. That's the kind of win that builds momentum. I kind of want to get back out on the field right away after that one and while that team is feeling that victory. But not the case. They got the bye. They got to play the schedule as is. But I was thrilled. And I was thrilled. And I tweeted it, right? When the Bears were getting the ball and they were going to have to drive, largely the length of the field, 75 yards, whatever it was, to score a touchdown. They needed a touchdown. They couldn't settle for a field goal. When that was the situation, I said, all right, Ben, all right, Caleb, let's prove that you're that duo. That duo, that's what we're looking at here. Yes, we need Ben Johnson to turn the culture on its head. Yes, we need Ben Johnson to be a good sideline CEO. We need all these things. We need Dennis Allen to be really good as a defensive coordinator. We need the talent to be there. We need Ryan Poles to get more talent on the football field. All these things need to happen for the Chicago Bears to become a great football team. But at the top of the list, Ben Johnson as play caller, Caleb Williams as quarterback, that needs to be an elite duo. We bring up, like, when we look at the best duos in the league right now, they're not necessarily the best teams. Now, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes certainly are. John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson, that's an elite duo, but at the same time, the Ravens are falling apart here. They've never gotten it done together in the postseason, so there are some issues there. Sean McDermott, I don't think anyone's hanging their hat on Sean McDermott as a great head coach. He's just sitting there blessed with Josh Allen. When you look at some of the other great quarterbacks, Joe Burrow is stuck with Zach Taylor. Obviously, Burrow out for the year. Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert, that one's got potential to really look good moving forward. Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni is one you might like. Obviously, they won a Super Bowl. You can't dislike it. But at the same time, the Eagles' offense looks lost this year. They just had 200 yards of total offense in this last game. They win because the Eagles know how to win football games. But it's not like, people don't go, Walsh and Montana, Aikman and Johnson, and then, they don't Brady Belichick and Hurts Sirianni. That's not what happens there. That's not how the thought process goes. Stafford and McVay is another good one. We know how good LaFleur is. Jordan Love, to me, it limited. Like, we see that tie. Jordan Love almost cost him the game with that stupid decision to launch the ball into the end zone. I don't know what he was thinking. The Dallas clock operator absolutely could have bled that clock. That was a very favorable clock as far as I'm concerned for Green Bay. Is J.J. McCarthy going to be that guy for Kevin O'Connell? Like, you sit there, you see a lot of great offensive minds. They don't have that elite quarterback. Reed and Mahomes, that's definitely one. Can Johnson and Williams become one of those duos? And when you see, this is what's great, right? This is what's great. When you see the Dallas game the week before, that game, I'm not saying Ben Johnson didn't call a good game. He did. Caleb Williams executed that game to near perfection. He was fabulous in that football game where you sit there and say, that's the Caleb Williams I want to see. When we see the Raiders game, and even that last drive, Caleb Williams did what he needed to do. This is not a knock on anything, how Caleb Williams performed in that football game, and especially on that drive. He scrambled when he needed to. He picked up first downs when he needed to. He made the plays he needed to. But that was not a Caleb Williams chef's kiss execution drive. They ran the football a lot. Yeah, that was not Caleb Williams being a surgeon dissecting the Raiders defense and marching them down the field. And that's not to knock Caleb Williams. That's to tip the cap to Ben Johnson, who called a fantastic final drive, got the Bears in the end zone, exactly what they needed to. Obviously, tried to get the 2-point conversion, which would have made you feel a little better on that field goal attempt, before the field goal attempt, that was just going to be going for a tie and not for the win. They don't get the 2-point conversion, and that's the situation. But Caleb Williams did enough on that drive. He didn't make the mistakes. He made the plays he needed to, and Ben Johnson called a flawless drive. So when you sit there and you see Caleb Williams the week before and Ben Johnson the week after, you sit there and say, yeah, this might be that duo. This might be that's not now, maybe not next year, but this might be a Reed Mahomes duo when these guys really get on the same page. It has that kind of potential. Not that it is, big difference there, but that kind of potential. And I will admit, I sounded a lot of alarms after week 1. And if you go back and listen to that podcast, I probably sound pretty stupid. And I'm okay saying that. I react to what I saw, and I tried not to overreact, but that frantic feeling that Caleb had in the pocket had me really nervous. Like this just wasn't clicking for him. But maybe it was just a little overwhelming trying to run that offense for the first time for a full game and the lights of Monday Night Football in the first game. Maybe that was a lot for Caleb. I don't know. But Caleb has settled into this a lot more. He has looked a lot better. When you look at the statistics, Caleb Williams is pretty much top 10 in every category you'd want him to be in the league. EPA per play, if that's your jam, little too far. CPOE is not great right now because he has had some errant passes. He's still having some errant passes. I would like him to clean that up more. We're still seeing on short stuff too. It's not just deep ball accuracy where he misses a guy where that happens. No, it's short stuff. It's easy button stuff that he's got to hit a little more regularly. I'm not sure what's going on there. Ben Johnson's a smarter guy than I am, certainly. So I'm sure he's working on it with Caleb. I'm sure they're going to figure it out, because this isn't just like where he's off a little bit, where you sit there and say, well, he's not that accurate of a quarterback. No, he still makes the incredible throws, but these other throws, sometimes they're off by 5, 6, 7 yards. So something's happening there with Caleb, whether it be footwork, arm angles, whatever it might be. I am not a quarterback guru. Go, watch Tim Jenkins or Kurt Warner or some quarterback breaking down film, because I'm not going to try and pretend to be someone I'm not. I'm sitting there, I'm watching the game, I'm reacting, and I'm seeing really positive steps for Caleb Williams and for Ben Johnson and this offense. So it's an exciting thing to see the Chicago Bears headed in the right direction, but at the same time, we do have to be objective enough to sit there and say the Dallas Cowboys are the worst defense in the NFL. That's not hyperbole. That is statistically accurate. That is what they are. And the Las Vegas Raiders are not a great football team. And that's how the Bears got to 2-2. Now, I know you're going to sit there, but Bill, the Cowboys just tied the Packers. The Packers, you said, were a great football team. The Cowboys hung in there with the Eagles. The Eagles, you say, are a great football team. Yeah, I'm not saying the Cowboys are terrible. I'm saying the Cowboys defense is terrible. There hasn't been anything we've seen from the Cowboys defense other than on the other side of the weather delay in week 1, where the offenses just stopped playing. Have we seen anything that shows that Matt Eberflus's Matt Eberflus's defense is any good? Yeah, we haven't seen it. I'm sorry, Matt. I hear you're a nice guy. I also hear you're kind of arrogant, and you never really admit when you're wrong, which was very clear in those press conferences. No, I said the final nail was in the coffin on Matt Eberflus. I said the final nail was in the coffin on Matt Eberflus. We move on, and we move on to Ben Johnson. But like I said, you're seeing Caleb Williams statistically doing exactly what he needs to do. You're seeing Caleb Williams comparing him to his peers, the quarterbacks of the last couple 3 drafts. He's right at the top of the list. Drake May playing fantastic football this year in New England as well. Got to give Drake May credit. Ryan Poles maybe shouldn't have laughed the scouts out of the room that wanted to at least consider Drake May, but we move on from that. Caleb Williams is where he needs to be right now. He is in a position to build on this, move forward, and have a really good season, and possibly the greatest quarterback season in Chicago Bears history, which we know is a very low bar. But at the same time, it's a bar that Caleb Williams needs to step over. And once he does that, then he can start passing other bars about just how good he is, because we know the lowest of the low bars. In fact, I saw Big Cat, Dan Katz had a funny stat about how the Chicago Bears have more 4,000-yard passers than any other team in NFL history, which we know, of course, is a play on the idea that the Chicago Bears have never had a 4,000-yard passer. But what the stat is the Bears have had so many terrible quarterbacks that just have 2 seasons of 2,000 yards passing that the Bears have 21 or something quarterbacks that have thrown for 4,000 yards in their career, which is more than any other team because other teams have had more quarterback stability. So a funny stat to turn on its head. I will give Big Cat credit for that one. So we know Caleb Williams can easily climb the ladder of Chicago Bears quarterbacks. We need Caleb Williams to easily pass that bar and then start showing that he is a legitimate quarterback that can be talked about in the breaths of the other excellent quarterbacks in this league currently. And then hopefully one day we start talking about where Caleb Williams is all time in terms of the great quarterbacks. That would be a really, really fun conversation to have, and one I would love to dive into because I'm a guy who loves NFL history. And if I'm actually comparing a Chicago Bears quarterback to Bart Starr and Roger Staubach and Sammy Baugh, hell yeah, let me do that. Let me have that kind of fun. But we are a decade in putting the cart in front of the horse on that one. So a lot of positives there with Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson. And Ben Johnson, one other thing I want to say about Ben Johnson, and I'm going to bring up Matt Eberflus, but again, like I said last week, we're going to use Matt Eberflus as a comparison, right? We're going to use him as a data point to compare Ben Johnson. We saw a lot of people having fun on social media talking about Ben Johnson and his post-game speeches compared to Matt Eberflus. And I'll tell you what, we can have fun with it, but at the same time, can we really stop and just take a minute and see the true contrast in differences there and showing just how bad Matt Eberflus really was at this? Like, let's look at Matt Nagy, right? We know Nagy, when crap was hitting the fan, Nagy didn't know what to do. We know Nagy didn't really truly know how to run the football and how to marry the run and the pass. We knew Nagy was not great at making an offense, building it around his players' skills. He wanted his players to fit into his offense. We know the Matt Nagy flaws. But I'll tell you what, those football players really seem to love Club Dub, right? They were, when they won that game and they knew Club Dub was coming, they were fired up for it. So when Nagy got them ready for, that was fun. Everyone loved Club Dub. And when Nagy had that team humming, it was fun to see. Even in those 8-8 seasons, it was fun to see. Obviously, the wheels fell off at the end for Matt Nagy. But when you see Ben Johnson, right, and you see his good, better, best, and you see the players around him, when you see him passing out game balls and the players all talking and addressing the team after earning those game balls, when you see what he's building in that locker room, and then you see Matt Eberflus talking to the locker room like he's some third cousin that they haven't met in 6 years, trying to talk about, hey, we did this well and we did that well, and there's no energy, and the room is just standing around. Half of them, or not half, being fair, some of them are looking at their phones. He's got no attention to the room. Ben Johnson has every eyeball, not just players, coaches, trainers, anyone in that room. The eyes are glued on Ben Johnson. He commands the room it is just, I love bringing up the fact that in January, people were saying he's just a math nerd that wants to sit with a whiteboard. They did not know Ben Johnson at all. And let me talk about the Ben Johnson interview for the sideline, the halftime interview that Ben Johnson did with the death stare. And I get it. Should he have done the death stare? No, he should not have done the death stare. But as someone who has worked in media for over 20 years, wow, make that math adjustment. For 25 years, who has worked in the media, I can sit there and say there is an unwritten rule for sideline reporters that you do not challenge the head coach. You do not sit there and say, you're doing this wrong. How are you going to fix it? Basically, you're not supposed to do that. Now, it's not to say you can't do it. It's an unwritten rule that says you don't. That's kind of the agreement. These coaches are contractually obligated to do these interviews. They don't want to sit there and have their feet put on the fire for whatever the reason, right? Whether they're losing, whether there was a poor play, whatever it might be. Now, you can address it. You got to figure out the right way to address it, but you're not supposed to challenge the coach. Now, it's not to say you can't. Jim Gray, when he was doing sideline reporting, constantly challenged coaches or managers in baseball, whoever it might have been. That's who Jim Gray was. And some people liked him for it. Some people didn't like him for it. If you're old enough to remember, and if you don't, you can find it on YouTube. When baseball in I think it was the late 90s did a all-century type team, maybe it was 2000, did an all-century team, and Pete Rose made it. Baseball made a concession and allowed Pete Rose to be on the baseball field. And you can hate Pete Rose, you can love Pete Rose, doesn't matter. But in the moment where they were celebrating baseball, Jim Gray gets an opportunity to talk to Pete Rose and just goes, Pete, when are you going to admit you gambled on baseball? It was not the time for that, Jim. Everybody knows it wasn't the time for it. And even if you hated Pete Rose, thought he was a bit of a jerk, probably accurate with that. At the same time, even those people are like, that's not the time to do it because it's marring the baseball celebration that you're having all these all-time great players all together at the World Series on the field at the same time. And Jim Gray tries to do a gotcha moment. So you can do it if you want. It is reporters' discretion if you wanted to challenge a coach. But if you do, you have to be ready to get the horns. And that's what happened with Ben Johnson. And Adit said that maybe, that she wasn't trying to do it. But then I will say this, she worded the question poorly, right? She asked Ben a question. Ben said what was going on. And then she said, so you need to change what you're doing. She didn't ask a question. She made a statement. Now, she thought she was following up to what Ben was saying, but Ben didn't read it that way. Ben thought that she was challenging him. So you need to change how you've approached this game, how you're coaching this game. And Ben took offense to that, and that's fine. Now, if you want to say Ben should have handled it better in the moment, fine. But at the same time, I had no problems with it. I really didn't. He wasn't offensive. He didn't tell her to get back in the kitchen or say some, misogynistic thing. He just said, we'll be just fine, and gave her a look. And he would have done that to any sideline reporter because he was in ball mode and he was fired up and he was not in the mood to get challenged. And when you say, so you need to change what you're doing, you're going to get under Ben's skin. So I didn't have a problem with this. This was a controversy that shouldn't have been a controversy to me, but media are going to talk about things and they're going to talk about a sideline interview. And I'll say, if I was her and I got that desk there from Ben Johnson, I'd be a little uncomfortable. That look that he has, that intensity in those eyes, whoo! When Ben Johnson told his football players, get comfortable being uncomfortable, I'm sure some of them have gotten that stare. That's not a stare you want. I don't care if Ben's a little guy. That is not a stare you want to be on the other end of. That was something else from Ben Johnson. But here we are, Chicago Bears 2-2 at the bye. And let's talk about, before we kind of get into the roster here on a couple of the things we need to see moving forward, I said we were going to talk about hope. Hope is a dangerous thing, said Ellis Redding in Shawshank Redemption. Hope can drive a man insane. And that feels like a Chicago Bears fan base to me, right? Hope is a dangerous thing. Hope can drive a man insane. How many seasons as Chicago Bears fans have we sat here and said, oh, this could be the season? I mean, I was flying high going into 2019. The Bears coming off that magical 2018 season. Mitch Trubisky looking functional in 2018, ready to break out in 2019. I felt it. I had Peter Bukowski on my podcast, the troll of trolls for Chicago Bears fans, to start week 1, 2019 ahead of that game. He picked the Chicago Bears to win the division. He was feeling it. That means the opponents, the other fan bases were feeling it. That the Chicago Bears were back. They had a great defense, and they were going to get enough out of this offense. It felt like it was coming together. Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy were the right guys for the job, and this is how the Bears were going to be moving forward. Then 2019 happened, and I know they went 8-8, but it felt like they went 5-11. That was a brutal season, and you knew it was over after that week 1 game against the Packers. You knew it. There was no coming back from that. They were flat. Everything was wrong. And yeah, they won a couple other games early, but you knew, like the Broncos game, the whole offense was awful. Mitch made one play and they squeak out a win with a field. Like it was a hot mess that season. And that's what the Bears do. The later Lovie Smith years with the return to the NFC Championship game again against the Green Bay Packers. And what happens? Caleb Haney happens. I'm not ripping Jay Cutler. He was legitimately injured. Caleb Haney happens. Like, hope. We hope as Chicago Bears fans because we haven't had much else but hope. We've had one Super Bowl appearance in the last 39 years of football. We've had 3 NFC Championship games in the last 39 years of football. And in those NFC Championship games, we are 1-2. This is not something you hang your hat on for success. You're a Kansas City Chiefs fan right now. It is not hope. You are reacting into the moment because the Kansas City Chiefs are a legitimate contender and have been since 2018. But for the Chicago Bears, we cling to hope. And what happens when you're my age and you have hoped and you have hoped and you have hoped? You start learning that hope is foolish. And that you shouldn't hope, because if you hope is how you have expectations that are failed to be met, and hope is how your soul gets crushed. And you start off as a kid, and you hope, and every year is this year, and every year is going to be better, and then you start getting older, and you realize that that's not always the case. But you're still hopeful when it makes sense to be hopeful. But then in the back of your head, as you continue to get older, you sit there and say, maybe I shouldn't be hopeful because George McCaskey is still running this team and there are still plenty of issues with this team. So you sit there and say, maybe I shouldn't hope. So again, year after year, and especially being in the media and covering the team, things change, your perspective changes. And that callus, right? That ball of hope and the callus just keeps building and building and building over it. It's like your big toe when you've spent the entire summer barefoot running around outside and you get that big, ugly callus on your big toe. You know what I'm talking about. And it gets thicker and thicker. And that's your hope. And you barely can recognize the hope anymore because that big, ugly callus is sitting over it. So in 2018, when the double doink happens, if you had a calloused heart of hope like I did, it stung a little. Because it penetrated through that callus a little bit, but there was still plenty of callus to just seal it right back up and bury that hope. And then in 2019, you're like, all right, maybe it's going to get better. And you start filing it away a little bit, but then bam, week 1 happens. You just close it right up right away. So there hasn't been a reason, especially since 2018, to even think about filing that callus off the hope. And now Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams, they have a file and they're working it. They are working that callus. They're working that callus back and forth. They go back and forth. That callus is getting thinner. It's getting thinner. It's getting thinner. They're doing it to me. They're doing it to me. They are starting, that hope is starting to burst through in little spots here and there. It's a dangerous, dangerous thing. And right now, I'm still Ellis Redding. Hope is a dangerous thing. Hope can drive a man insane. I haven't reached the Andy Dufresne moment of Shawshank Redemption, where he tells Red, hope is a good thing. Hope could be the best of things. And a great thing never dies. That's hope. That's Andy Dufresne's version of hope. And I hope that I can have that version of hope. But I don't have it quite yet, but it's getting closer. It's getting closer. And I've told the Chicago Bears, I wrote a column this week at Windy City Gridiron. Don't hurt me again, Bears. And I'm not sitting here saying that I think the Bears are going to be a Super Bowl contender because they beat the Raiders and blocked a field goal. I still have expectations that are lower than many people's for this season. I don't know if the Bears are going to make the playoffs. They might. Some of the good teams in the NFC, not quite as good as some people expected. There could be an opening for the Bears. If they can get to at least that 9th win, probably need that 10th win. The end of that season schedule doesn't look great. There's some winnable games in the middle, but it's not impossible. It's not easy. So I'm not saying the hope that is, the callus that's being filed away is about this season. No, it's about the big picture. It's far more dangerous than a single season. Single seasons like 2018 and 2010, single seasons don't crush your soul. But if you start getting hope that the franchise and the team can start consistently winning down the road when they haven't done it yet, they're coming off a 5-12 season. They're only sitting at 2-2, and they got their asses handed to them by Detroit, and they gagged a game away against Minnesota. There's plenty of reasons to not have the hope, but yet still, Caleb and Ben have that file, and they're filing away, and they're filing away, and my hope is growing. I can feel it growing. I can't have my soul crushed again, Chicago Bears. I can't do it. I can't go back to the kid that was sitting at Soldier Field watching Jerry Rice streak down the sideline against the 49ers, winning that NFC Championship game 28-3. And my dad on the way home going, what did you think when they have Montana and we have Tom Zach? Like, I get it, but I'm a kid. I'm 11 years old. I had hope. Don't crush my soul, Chicago Bears. I can't do it again, but I feel it. It's coming. It's coming. The hope is growing. So maybe one day I get here with the Chicago Bears and the hope is fulfilled and the hope becomes joy because the Chicago Bears are fulfilling expectations. There can only be enough for this to happen one more time. I can't keep having hope. Eventually, I'm going to have a heart attack at this point. I'm getting too old for this shit, to quote Danny Glover. That's the situation for the Chicago Bears and for me and for this entire fan base. We hope and we hope and we hope. And maybe this is the right duo. It certainly feels like this is the right duo. I haven't felt this for a coach like I feel like Ben Johnson being the right guy ever. Like, I didn't know what I was watching with Ditka, and Ditka certainly had flaws and pissed off his players with all the, players couldn't have endorsements, but Mike Ditka gobbled them all up. That pissed off players. Dave Wannstedt, I remember my friends and I made, we wanted to make t-shirts called Dick Geronstedt, and it was Dick Geron with a mustache, because we didn't think either. That was in my teenage years and early 20s. We didn't think that was any good. I loved Lovey. Lovey was a great coach for the moment, but you didn't sit there and say, oh, Lovey's going to win 3 championships. He's the guy. You didn't feel that. Tressman was a failure from the start. John Fox, third team's the charm? He's going to win multiple Super Bowls? No, everyone knew who John Fox was. Nagy, there was some hope. Not saying there wasn't, but not like this. I didn't sit here and be like, oh, man, Matt Nagy? Like, I was excited for Nagy. I admit, I was more excited for Nagy than any other coach in this group, other than Ben Johnson and Matt Eberflus. I still remember doing the Barely a podcast after the Bears hired Matt Eberflus. And Robert Schmitz and I sitting here trying to not sit here and be like, well, this was stupid. But both of us were just feeling it. And we're like, all right. I mean, Eberflus and Hits and they gonna try and, fix the culture. And, Nagy kind of maybe lost the locker room and maybe he can rally. And is he gonna be the guy for Justin Fields? You just kind of look like you just kind of sucked on a lemon for 10 seconds and then tried to talk into the microphone. I mean, but Ben Johnson, when you sit there and go, this was the best play caller. You heard Patrick Maher on this podcast. He's calling Ben Johnson a Monet. Patrick Maher, this guy's covered the NFL for 25 years. He calls Ben Johnson the greatest play caller he's ever seen. Not Andy Reid, not Sean McVay, not Josh McDaniels. Ben Johnson. That's what he said. He said Ben Johnson. So that's who the Chicago Bears have. Then to see who this guy is as a culture setter, and we're combining these two guys, and that he'll take accountability in press conferences so he can also make the locker room accountable. And the locker room, if he calls out a player, if he calls out the practices, they're going to sit there, screw this guy calling me out, when he's calling himself out and saying, I didn't do this right, I didn't do that right, I didn't handle this right. You can't do it because he's holding himself accountable. Different than Matt Eberflus and they didn't execute well enough. Oh, if I heard that one more time, I think I'd jump out the window. Second story too, so I just only have broken legs. That's agonizing. That's what Matt Eberflus did to my brain. So when we're here with Ben Johnson, it just feels different. And Caleb Williams, how I have been honking horns for Caleb Williams since 2023 when Justin Fields was still the quarterback. And y'all told me to shove it when I said they're going to maybe have the number one pick. Caleb Williams. Yes, my camera is shaking because I'm hitting the desk so damn hard. I was on the Caleb Williams train. I think I was first. This was in like October. And I'm like, this needs to happen. And it happened. And now it's coming together. The hope is there. And I just hope I don't get crushed one more time. Let's talk a little bit about the roster here. I've gone longer than I thought I would. Maybe with the mailbag, maybe we'll hit an hour today. But let's talk about this roster. Offensive line. We're going to see what they do here with the tackle position. Looks like Theo Eggs-Benedette is going to be your left tackle. Hopefully Darnell Wright is back. We'll see what happens here after the bye. I don't think Theo Benedette should be the left tackle, but at the same time, Braxton Jones is a mess. Ozzie Trapillo can't play over there, and Karan Amagaji should never play on the football field ever again. So this is the situation they're in. And it's rough that a UDFA has to be your starting left tackle. We're going to see how this goes. I don't know what the answer is. The only other answer I can think of is swapping Darnell Wright over to the left side and playing Trapillo at right tackle, but that's a rough thing to do to a player in the middle of the season. If they needed to do that, they should have been doing that in OTAs. That's how long ago they should have been giving Darnell Wright an opportunity to do that. Maybe they do it next season because, again, I still think they're going to have enough situations with other positions that they can't be spending on left tackle. I just don't think they should be doing it. So we'll see how this works moving forward here with Theo Benedette. I'm sure Ben Johnson's going to figure out ways to protect him a little bit. But, the other four offensive line positions overall looking pretty good. Obviously, that offensive line far more functional than it's been. But now, I don't think it's at the level I think Bears fans hoped it was going to be this year, but it's much, much better. I don't think there should be any complaints overall about the offensive line when you compare where it has been previously. So offensive line, pretty happy. Wide receivers, obviously Roma Dunze has been having an outstanding season. Zacchaeus has certainly been useful. DJ Moore not having the explosive statistics. I wonder how DJ's handling that internally. But hey, if you win football games, you're going to see a lot of smiles from DJ Moore, at least one would hope. And of course, Luther Burden, big game against Dallas. We will see if Burden gets more and more involved in the offense. It's a great situation to be in when you have that many quality wide receivers. The tight ends, Loveland, we'll see about this injury and when he's going to be able to get back on the field. Hopefully it's right after the bye. Cole Kmet, mess of a game against the Raiders. I know Cole's been blocking hard. I know fans love Cole Kmet. He almost cost him that game. Like if you were going to point the finger, and I know Ben Johnson doesn't point fingers at one individual, but Cole Kmet would have been right at the top of the list if you were going to point fingers if the Bears ended up on the wrong side of the win-loss column on that one. Tight ends aren't, I thought they were going to eat in 12 personnel, and both these guys were going to be getting more targets than they have been. We will see how they are utilized moving forward. Ben Johnson has talked about not getting the tight ends involved enough. Then he tries to, obviously, against the Raiders, and Kmet gets all the targets, and he can't catch anything. So I don't know exactly what was going on there with Cole. He's better than that. We can sit there and criticize Cole Kmet for plenty of things. He is a better football player than that. So we will see about that moving forward. The running back room is exactly what we thought it would be. Not good. Roschon Johnson is a ghost. I know I went on this podcast and say, I've heard they really like Roschon Johnson. Maybe he can be that Jamal Williams role that the Lions had when Ben Johnson's first year, when it was Swift and Jamal Williams. That's clearly not the case. He's been healthy for a couple of weeks. He has like no offensive snaps. He's not getting out there at all. It's just Swift and it's Monangai. So clearly that's not the case with Roschon Johnson. I shared clearly some crappy information, or things have changed since his injury in early August, and they're just like, we can't rely on the guy. I don't know what the situation is, but he is not involved in the offense. Monangai looks good for a seventh rounder, but doesn't look efficient enough to be a guy that can get 15 carries a game, and Swift is Swift. He'll break a big play here or there because he's quick and he's agile, but he's got terrible vision. He can't run well between the tackles. He's too busy juking and not running forward and taking the 3 yards. He wants to try and, instead of grabbing the 3 yards, he wants to try and grab 6 or 7. It's just not there. And if it is there, he doesn't see it anyway. So the running back room's a mess. The running back room needs massive changes going into next year. They need, I'd say, 2 new backs, because clearly, maybe you'd get rid of Travis Homer. His contract's up. Move Roschon Johnson into that RB4 role where he's just playing special teams. Kyle Monangai can be your RB3, and you need a new RB1 and an RB2. Then maybe that situation that looks like a pretty good running back room moving forward. But it's not a good running back room now. You can't rely on this room. I'm not saying the Bears should go out and make a trade, because I don't think the team is good enough to go and spend resources to try and get a middle-of-the-road running back. It's not like you're getting Saquon Barkley in here in a trade, so keep that in mind. But this is what the offense is. But hopefully with Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson, the passing game will lead them enough where it'll start opening things up a little more in the running game. On the defensive side of the football, secondary played pretty well against the Raiders, but with Jalen Johnson out, they need Kyler Gordon back on the field. They need Jaquan Brisker to stay on the field. Kevin Byard, outstanding game. They need Byard to keep the clock turned back a little bit as well, and they need a good performance out of him. TJ Edwards needs to get back out on the field. That's where it's tough to assess this defense, is because they have had so many injuries. But overall, the defense has to play better. Now, I did see a statistic that the Bears' third down defense is one of the better defenses in the league in terms of EPA per play and how they're performing there. So the Bears defense has not been playing well, but they have been playing better when it mattered on third down. And to wrap it up here, defensive line, not good. Just not getting enough there. The run defense, mediocre. Ashton Genty couldn't get anything going with his offensive line for 3 weeks, and he ran the rock against the Bears. Pass rush has not been there consistently. Montez Sweat has been a no-show largely for 4 games. They're not getting them. Grady Jarrett's banged up. They're not getting enough on the interior. Javon Dexter is splashing a couple good games, but not consistently there. And his run defense still isn't good enough in terms of lifting up the rest of that interior. Shamar Turner's barely playing. Odengbo looked pretty good in week 1, hasn't done much since. They need Austin Booker back. And I'll be honest, when you're at a second-year player, 5th round pick with Austin Booker, you can't be sitting here going, oh my God, I need Austin Booker back. Everything is hinging on Austin Booker. That shouldn't be the situation, but that's exactly where they are. So things are looking good here, but at the same time, at Washington, coming out of the bye, that's not going to be easy. We know they've got teams like Baltimore struggling, but Baltimore on the horizon, Cincinnati on the horizon. Pittsburgh on the horizon. Again, Cincinnati without Joe Burrow looks obviously a lot more manageable. That's a road game, but it looks a lot more manageable than it did a little bit before. Winnable games like the Saints and the Giants. So the Bears are going to win some football games. Are they going to win enough? I would have liked to have seen them 3-1 in the bye. I think they really needed to win Minnesota or Detroit. The fact that they're 0-2 in the division is not great if you're a playoff guy, but they are 2-2. They have some winnable games coming up. They need to make sure they start eating some games here and winning some football games, because they absolutely need to have a good record going into those last 5-6 games of the year when they've got Detroit on the schedule, Green Bay twice on the schedule, San Francisco on the schedule. I know Cleveland's mixed in there, but Cleveland's defense, like that's not going to be an easy defense to score on if they're healthy when they play them in December. Should win the game, obviously, but it's going to be a scrappy game. So the Bears need to make sure they win these games in the middle of the season if they want to try and make the playoffs, because the end of the season is going to be a challenge. All right, let's get to the mailbag. This is Bears Banter. We will take a quick break and be back right after this. Welcome back into the podcast. Let's jump in with the mailbag and let's get right to it. We got a few of these. Let's jump in. Let's start with @_Adam Hess. If you could give Caleb Williams one trait from any past Bears quarterback that you think could turn him into a superstar QB instantly, what would it be? That's a fun question, Adam. I like that one. Let's think about this for a minute. I mean, I could do something cheesy like the longevity of George Blanda. You know, if Caleb's going to play quarterback till he's 47 years old, that's certainly going to be able to make him a superstar. You know, Jim McMahon, you know, I mean, I think Caleb's a pretty good leader, but I think Jim McMahon was probably the best leader in terms of the intangibles and everything the Bears have had at quarterback. You know, there's nothing from Harbaugh. There's, you know, nothing from Kyle Orton, nothing. All right. This may be a cop-out answer, but this is the answer. This is the answer, Adam. Justin Fields' running ability. Like now let's think about this for a minute. If you take Justin Fields' rushing ability, who he is as a runner, he's still doing it. He's still running for 40-yard touchdowns, you know, against, you know, for the Jets there. If you take his rushing ability with Caleb Williams' ability to maneuver in the pocket, now he's avoiding sacks, the arm talent, the willingness to go over the middle of the field, everything that we see Caleb doing. And not that he's a bad runner, Caleb's an excellent scrambler, but Justin Fields is probably the best running quarterback in the NFL. If we're being honest, he's better than Lamar. He's better than everyone. So if you give him the best running quarterback in the NFL with Caleb's arm talent, I mean, that's a ridiculous player. That's better than Lamar Jackson. I don't know how you would stop that player. So I think that's the answer. That's the easy answer. I could try and give you something a little bit more from the past, but I mean, the problem is we're talking about quarterbacks that are just terrible. Like, right? Like, I mean, what you want, like Josh McCown's ability in the white on the whiteboard? Like, if we're trying to do something like that, something that's kind of a deep cut. But if we're looking at the obvious things, I think it is certainly Justin Fields, make Caleb Williams the best running quarterback in the NFL, as well as that crazy arm talent and everything he can do. I think that is your answer. Lester Wiltfong chimes in. What are your Austin Booker expectations once he returns? Lester, maybe this is more hope than expectations. I really hope he can provide a legitimate pass rush. I do have some concerns. I think he'll be better than he was last year, but we did see Austin Booker outstanding in the preseason as a rookie and did little to nothing in the regular season. So now he was even better this year in the preseason against some slightly better competition. He was getting some slightly better reps there, you know, against second teamers mostly. So maybe that translates a little better for him in terms of being a legitimate pass rusher. But that's what the Bears need. The Bears need a third defensive end who can come in and rush the passer off the edge and create some pressure. And maybe you want to put Odengbo inside and you can go Booker, Odengbo, and Sweat, and maybe your fourth guy there is Dexter in terms of the best pass rush, the foursome you can have. That's probably, that's the best case scenario. My expectations are not that high. Again, I expect better pass rusher than he was last year. I still have concerns about how he's going to be able to stop the run as a defender against first-team offensive linemen. I need to see it before I will sit there and say he can do it. He didn't do it last year. I felt offenses attacked him in the running game when he was on the field. It felt like, I don't have the numbers in front of me, it felt like that 5, 6, 7, 8-yard chunks every time they ran at Austin Booker last year. So we need to see an improvement as a run defender, and we obviously need to see him really shine as a situational pass rusher. I will say he's going to be the best third edge they have. He's going to be better than the other garbage they've been throwing out there, but I think it'll be an upgrade, but I don't think it's going to be sky's the limit. Maybe we'll see that breakout in 2026. That's my hope for him, because everyone said he came out probably a year early. Had he stayed a year, he probably would have been a second-round pick, and now you're talking about a second-round rookie who, if he's a edge that you can rely on a little bit as a situational rusher as your third edge, that's a pretty good rookie season. Maybe he breaks out in year 3 in 2026. All right, how about Bobby Peters? How do we feel the coaching staff has done with regard to game planning? Now, this is funny coming from Bobby Peters. Of course, Bobby was a guest on this podcast, maybe about a month ago, 6 weeks ago at this point. So Bobby asking me this question is a little funny, because as we know, Bobby knows this stuff a lot better than I do. But here's what I would say, Bobby. Let me first start on the defensive side of the ball, because I think while the defense has been getting pretty slapped around overall, I think we can all say that for the most part pretty comfortably, that this defense is not playing to the level that we were hoping it was going to be able to play at. But I would say this. The fact that this defense is playing outstanding football on third down is a real benefit to Dennis Allen, and making sure this defense is playing the way it needs to play when it matters most. So while I think there are certainly some issues with what Dennis Allen has done, you can also sit there and say the personnel has been severely limited, with 2 of his top 2 cornerbacks out, one of his top 2 linebackers out, the third edge out. Grady Jarrett's missed a game. So with the injuries he's had, I think Dennis Allen has kind of done the best he could do with it. But you do have to say, I mean, look, week 1 against the Vikings, they put JJ McCarthy in a blender for 3 quarters until everything hit the fan. We have 5 quarters of disastrous football, from the 4th quarter against Minnesota to the next 4 against Detroit. Really hard to sit there and praise anything that was done in that stretch, especially on the defensive side of the football. But things got better the last couple weeks, right? Things were better against Vegas. Things were better against Dallas. They weren't fantastic, but they were certainly better. And that situational defense on third down, certainly a tip of the cap to Dennis Allen. Offensively, I mean, you'd love to see a little cleaner execution in the run game. I know the Bears statistically are winning. The run block win rates are good and everything like that. It still doesn't look quite cohesive enough. The way Ben calls a game plan, I have a really hard time questioning pretty much anything Ben does, because I know he knows 8,000 times more about football than I do. But like I will say, I mean, it was a really nice change to see this team score opening drive touchdowns the first 2 games of the season. Against Dallas, they didn't score an opening drive touchdown. They went out quickly. But if you're talking about 15 scripted plays, I think they only used 3 of them on that first drive. On that second drive, they marched down the field and scored a touchdown. Vegas, obviously, they weren't taking advantage of the turnovers, and it was kind of an uglier first half. But again, and I said this in my opening part of my podcast, Bobby, the way they scored that game-winning touchdown, you give credit to Caleb Williams for making the plays that he made, but I felt that drive was more credit to Ben Johnson for calling the right plays when he needed to call them. So certainly, I think game planning has been good. Coaching has been good. It hasn't been a home run, but of course you're 2-2, and you had an ass whooping in week 2 that is on the players and on the coaches. So we can't give them an A+, but I think we can certainly give them a B on both sides of the ball in terms of how they've done the first 4 games of the season. Our guy, Jeff Burkus, if you could own one relic / piece of memorabilia from the 1985 season, what would it be? That is a good question, Jeff. And I saw that before, and I meant to kind of do some pre-thinking on it, and I didn't. So we're going to do this in the moment here on the podcast. I mean, look, there are game-worn jerseys and autographed jerseys and cleats and all sorts of things that you could end up with during that football season. But for me, if I had to try and come up with one piece of memorabilia, and I don't even know if these pieces of memorabilia like truly exist, I would want the football or the jersey that Wilber Marshall scored the touchdown with in the NFC Championship game. To me, with everything that happened that season, if you told me you get one highlight that you get to watch, what highlight is that? It is the Wilber Marshall touchdown. And for me, the way NFL Films did it, if you watch the 1985 story of the 85 Bears, the old VHS tape, it's on YouTube. You can watch it there. And you watch how they built up to that play in terms of the NFL Films music and the way they use the close-ups. And you got Wilber Marshall running with the football. So if you don't know the play, Eric Dickerson fumbles at roughly the 50-yard line. I believe Richard Dent causes the fumble. It's laying there. Wilber Marshall picks it up, runs to the end zone while it's snowing at Soldier Field, and William Perry escorts him, makes one block that I don't know if the block mattered, but it's great theater. William Perry makes one block, and Wilber Marshall scores the touchdown. And to me, that is the exclamation point of the season. I know 46-10, you could say, William Perry's touchdown in the Super Bowl, but to me, while I love that as a kid, it's still kind of, shrouded in sadness because of what we know about Walter Payton in terms of him really wanting to score and Mike Ditka getting caught up in the moment of that game and not getting Payton 6 in terms of that game. So for me, I look at 24-0 in the NFC Championship game. That is the exclamation point for the season. And the fact that this was a team that was dominated by the defensive unit, that this defensive unit scored a lot of points. The offense didn't have to score all the points. The defensive unit and even the special teams units scored points. To me, give me the football or Wilber Marshall's game-worn jersey from the 1985 NFC Championship game, because that is my favorite play of that season. All right, JT Barzak, what are your thoughts on the rumored change to Benedict at left tackle after the bye? Do you think moving right and keeping Ozzie at right tackle was considered at all? Which offensive tackle would be active on game day, assuming Wright is healthy and Theo starts at left tackle? All right, JT, so here's the deal. And let's kind of break this down in terms of what the Bears need at left tackle. The Bears, every choice the Bears have at left tackle is bad. You have Braxton Jones, who isn't it. I don't know what's going on. Maybe he'll get healthier later in the season and he can play, but he is not the guy that the Bears hoped he could have been coming off this injury. So also for you Bears fans that are just like, oh, we can trade him and comp picks and everything. Braxton Jones is going to get nothing this offseason. Maybe because he's a tackle, he'll get, a 2-year deal for $12 million, something like that. That any hope that Braxton was getting one of these 5-year, $100 million, that is gone. That has evaporated. I feel bad for him because that would have been really nice for Braxton Jones, who really honestly earned a great contract, how he played the first 3 years, but his 4th year is a disaster. He is not healthy. He consistently misses games. So put that aside. So we're sitting here saying we can't rely as Bears fans on Braxton Jones to be the Bears left tackle. So what options does that give us? You give up the idea of moving right to left tackle and starting Ozzie Trapillo. That is probably the best option, but JT, it is really challenging to take a tackle who has been playing right tackle consistently for several years, swing him over to left tackle in the middle of the season if he hasn't practiced it at all. I think that's very unfair to do to Darnell Wright and could be a disastrous thing if the Bears tried to do that. That is something, if they were going to do that, they needed to do in OTAs. They needed to do in training camp. He needed several months to do it. I think it was Mark Schlereth. I don't remember exactly who it is, but someone talked about switching from left tackle to right tackle or right tackle to left tackle. And he basically, it's a little crass, but it gets the point home. It's like wiping your butt with the other hand. Like you sit there and go, that's not really something I want to try. So the way the footwork works and which foot you're stepping with first, everything is opposite there. It's not quite as complicated to switch from right guard to left guard on the interior. Tackle footwork is a far more important thing. And when you've got muscle memory on how you're doing a certain thing on the right side, you have to mirror everything on the left side. It's complicated. And in theory, they could do it at the bye, but I think that's a very dangerous idea to do in the middle of the season. And you could really screw up Darnell Wright. So while that's probably their best option in terms of getting talent on the field and might be the option they have to push that button in 2026, it's still not an option I really want them to consider right now. So for me right now, it's, and I've said this, I kind of said this going into the season, I feel like Darnell Wright's backup should be Ozzie Trapillo and Braxton Jones's backup should be Theo Benedict. Now, Theo Benedict, I don't think is an answer at left tackle. I do think what Theo Benedict could really be is if maybe he's not a starting caliber, maybe he's a borderline starting caliber. You know, obviously this is only year 2. The Bears control him for a 3rd year. Then it's a restricted free agency. They can sign him for another couple free years after that pretty easily, like they did with Tyson Bagent. Here's what I like about the Theo Benedict situation. We all talk about his short arms. Start getting Theo Benedict. And I'm not saying this season, he needs to play tackle this season, but in the offseason, start getting him reps at guard. The one thing that was nice about Matt Pryor when he was here last year is he could back up 4 offensive positions. And I think Theo Benedict could also be that guy who could back up 4 offensive line positions. That's a spectacularly versatile offensive lineman and who can do it pretty darn well. I mean, as a backup, I'm not saying he's a guy you sit there and be like, that's going to be our left guard of the future when Joe Thuney retires. And maybe he will be. He's not that right now. But right now, I think you look at him as being a potential really versatile backup. So that's what I want the Bears to focus on Benedict being next season. And then they have to figure out what they're going to do at left tackle and right tackle because, and as I have said, I do not want them to spend on left tackle. They've already spent significantly, assuming they're keeping Darnell Wright. They're going to have to pay him well over $20 million, $25-ish million a year. You're already paying those other offensive linemen. You can't pay 5 offensive linemen right now. You just can't do it. You need someone on a rookie contract. So if you move Darnell Wright over to the left side and Ozzie Trapillo is the guy on that rookie contract, that's the smart move to me to do. If you want to use your first round pick on a left tackle, that's fine. And you can kind of tell Darnell Wright in January, hey, you might be playing left tackle. You'll know if you have that draft pick done by the time OTAs in May start. And then you can be like, all right, Darnell, you're playing left tackle. Let's see what you can do. So I think that's kind of the situation there. That's the best way to put that for the Bears offensive line position. But for this season, I think if Braxton's not the guy, it's Theo Benedict at left tackle. Darnell Wright stays on the right side this year. And if Wright has injury issues, you play Ozzie Trapillo over there. And I think that's probably the best move moving forward. Maybe Trapillo can eventually swing over to the left side, but they don't want to do that this year. Don't mess with it. That's what I would do. And then in terms of who would be active on game days, you don't ever activate Karan Amagaji. That's always the answer. Okay. So you have Theo Benedict and, is starting. Ozzie Trapillo. Still keep Braxton Jones active on game days. Never, ever, 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 ever have Karan Amagaji active. Okay, JK999. What do you make of Gervon Dexter? Is he a good fit in this DA defense? Dennis Allen, of course. Is he better at defensive end for us? JK, that's a good question. He isn't quite the fit for Dennis Allen. I think that's fair, but at the same time, he's also the guy who's providing the most interior pressures from anyone across that defensive front. Andrew Billings isn't quite a fit either. Some of these guys are square pegs and round holes for Dennis Allen, and he's trying to make it work the best he can. But I will say at the same time, Dennis Allen, for all the compliments we give him, he certainly does not, get great edge pass rushers as part of his defense. It's never really been part of it. They're not guys he necessarily picks. When he picks certain guys, and he's involved in certain draft picks, high draft picks with New Orleans, with the Raiders, whatever it might have been, they weren't the best. So, in terms of Dennis Allen scouting that kind of stuff, still concerns. Gervon Dexter, kind of the same thing. He's improved again. This is what you like to see. First year, second year, third year, he's improved each year. But again, I think Gervon Dexter has issues defending the run. Now, other Bears players have issues defending the run. It is kind of what it is. It's never going to be his strength at this point, I don't think. But he does know how to win a pass rush rep. He does know how to get some pressure. He is showing some versatility coming from the outside. Do I think Gervon Dexter should be exclusively running from the outside? Probably not. I'm certainly not a defensive line expert in terms of exactly what he does, but some of the stuff he does works really well from the interior in terms of collapsing the pocket, pushing guys back, and getting some of that pressure sliding off of defenders. Does he quite have enough speed to consistently win off the edge? I don't know if he does. So putting him out there in terms of some different looks, I like, but I'm still not. I know some people are. Some people say, let's get, Dexter a full-time defensive end. I'm not there. I like the different fronts that Odengbo and Dexter can kind of switch back and forth, and you have some versatility with who can play where. But at the same time, I don't know if Dexter exclusively at an edge position is the right answer. So I do think Dexter should stick around. I have consistently said, and I don't think Bears fans particularly like it, that I think Gervon Dexter is a pretty good second defensive tackle, is a phenomenal third defensive tackle that you can play at 1 tech if need be, at 3 tech. And like we said, we can bounce him out at 5 tech, bounce him out further to the outside. I think he has versatility to play all over the line, which is why I love him as a third defensive tackle. But right now he's going to be a second defensive tackle and probably will be moving forward. Siege asks, any updated thoughts on Dio? It's clear Bears don't have any 1v1 pass rush winners. Yeah, and Odengbo, I honestly has been better than I expected him to be, but it's still not good. It's still more closer to the expectation I had for him. He had a really good, I thought, week 1. Hasn't been there quite as much in the weeks 2, 3, and 4. Excuse me there. Sorry about that. But yeah, Odengbo, I thought was overpaid. I didn't like the move. I still don't love the move. He's going to be here at least for 2 seasons. So Siege, I don't love it. He's fit more. He's closer to the expectations I expected from him. But at the same time, I will give him a little credit. He was better. He was especially better. I was very surprised how he played against the Vikings, but has moved closer to the expectation for me in weeks 2, 3, and 4. Ed Helinsky, I'm looking at the October games. Will it be scary good or a nightmare for the Bears? All right, Ed. I mean, you look at this upcoming schedule when they get to the other side of the bye, and there are certainly some winnable games here. If we just want to focus on October, that means we don't get to talk about the Giants or the Bengals game. And that Bengals game in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow playing certainly looked like that was going to be a challenging game. But the Bengals look like one of the bottom 5 or 6 teams in the league with Jake Browning at quarterback. So that becomes a really winnable game. So does the Giants. But you don't want to know about November. You want to know about October. So the Bears have 3 October games. Obviously, the Saints game at home, that's the second one. That's the sandwich game. They better win that one. If they lose that one, that is an ugly, ugly one. And then, of course, the first game, Monday Night Football, Commanders. A lot of people are dismissing the Commanders kind of like they stink. Like people, I swear I'm seeing on the timeline, people just like circling the Bears Commanders game, a road game against a playoff team. Oh, that's a win from the Bears. I wouldn't go that far if I really looked at this objectively, because I expect Lamar Jackson to be back. That's the 3rd game for that game. Now, if Lamar Jackson doesn't play, That Ravens game is totally different. The defense, they have not figured things out. Derrick Henry is finally looking like he's getting old, and Lamar Jackson is currently banged up. So if, depending on what the Ravens game is, tough to judge that one now. But if you tell me Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels are both playing, I expect the Bears to go 1-2 in October. Now, is that a nightmare? I don't think that's a nightmare, because I've also said, Ed, I've kind of pivoted my expectations for this season and lowered them a little. And I think this is probably an 8-9 win team that probably isn't going to make the playoffs. So if the Bears go 1-2 in their next 3 and then win, let's just play it out a little bit further into November, and then win the next 2 games against Cincinnati and the Giants, well, then suddenly a 5-4 Bears game, 5-4 Bears team with 8 games to play, well, that's a fun situation to be in. And yes, it certainly gets harder on the back half of the schedule with the 49ers, if they ever have anyone healthy, the Lions, 2 games against the Packers, the Eagles, the Steelers, really hard games. But if the Bears can go 4-4 and make it 9-8, upset one team there, go 5-3 and get themselves to 10-7, then they can get in the playoffs. Now, if they do go in there and beat the Commanders and win 2 out of 3, then they can win those 2 games in November. They go and win 4 out of their next 5 after winning these last 2 games. Suddenly they've actually won 6. They've started off 0-2, then won 6 out of their last 7. They're sitting at 6-3, and people are still talking. Now at 5-4, I still think NFL media is going to be talking about how the Bears are 5-2 in their last 7, and has Ben Johnson turned the corner. But I think it's going to be a little bit different there than if they win. So that Commanders game and that Ravens game are interesting. Tough to judge the Ravens game, because if Lamar is out for an extended period of time, right now they're expecting 2 or 3 games. But if it's 4 games, 5 games, and he ends up missing that game, that completely changes the expectations for that game. Big Del Boy 46. Is it true to say the Bears are a result of better than good coaching, more than recruitment and draft and free agency? Questions continue in an area where the Bears had decent draft, positions. So Big Del Boy, I mean, I will say this. It's absolutely more coaching than it is talent. Now, again, we're seeing the high picks starting to perform, right? Caleb Williams is Ben Johnson's getting what he needs to get out of Caleb Williams. Rome Odunze is playing like a top 10 wide receiver. And to Rome Odunze's credit, when you compare him to Malik Neighbors, now Neighbors, when he's on the field, certainly looks better than Odunze, but Neighbors is out for the year. And Marvin Harrison has been really strangely hit or miss in Arizona. Maybe Rome Odunze, and Brian Thomas Jr. has not had a good season in Jacksonville. Maybe Rome Odunze emerges as the best wide receiver, at least for this season, out of that draft class, which would be saying something in a loaded draft class that still has guys like Ricky Pearsall and Ladd McConkey and some of these other guys on the Keon Coleman on the back end. So Rome Odunze and Caleb Williams and this stuff is looking great. And obviously those are draft picks. But again, that's a number 1 overall pick. That's a top 10 pick. You expect those guys to hit in terms of draft positions. But you have to, this isn't just, when I say coaching, it's not just coaching on the field, it's changing the locker room culture. And we're really seeing Ben Johnson do that. I talked about that at the top of the podcast. So I give coaching a lot of credit, also because last season and the previous 2 seasons before that were coaching malpractice. The Bears coaching staff was terrible, led by a terrible head coach in Matt Eberflus. And we have one more from David Glenn. With the glut of injuries to start the season, it looks like some relief could be coming in week 6. Do you believe any of the returning players will have an impact? If so, what will the impact look like? Well, David, TJ Edwards is certainly an upgrade over Noah Sewell. We're not going to sit here and pretend Sewell's done okay filling in, but Sewell's been the guy we kind of expect him to be. Can defend the run and is going to struggle in pass protection or in pass coverage. That's who Sewell is. Sewell isn't the guy I would want to rely on as my 3rd linebacker, but that's where the Bears are. Choices made by Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen in terms of how they were going to construct that linebacker room. Jack Sanborn is in Dallas. Not that Jack Sanborn covers particularly well either, but I'd still, for the money Sanborn signed, I would still be much happier with Jack Sanborn as the team's 3rd linebacker than Noah Sewell, and it wouldn't have cost them anything. Colston Loveland, I think Ben Johnson would like to start getting him more involved in the offense. So in terms of the health on the offensive side of the ball, Darnell Wright, we don't need to talk about the expectation. We expect the offensive line to be better when Darnell Wright plays. In terms of Colson Loveland, I think we're going to start seeing him not like 8 targets a game, but I think we'll see Loveland starting to get 4 or 5 targets a game more frequently. It doesn't seem like Cole Kmet's going to get a lot of targets. He finally got a lot of targets, didn't come through. I think obviously that's going to remain in the back of Ben Johnson's head. Travis Homer, when he comes back, that's not going to be much. But on the defensive side of the ball, that's where we're looking. We're looking at Austin Booker. We're looking at TJ Edwards, and we're looking at Kyler Gordon. Kyler Gordon would be a huge benefit to the secondary. He has not played at all. Obviously, he's missed in terms of the Swiss Army knife he can be. You can blitz him. He can come up and cover in the run. Obviously, he's good in the slot in terms of coverage. Kyler Gordon's a great piece. So there would be significant impact in terms of overall upgrading the secondary. TJ Edwards is going to give the Bears a little bit better pass defense in the middle of the field, short middle of the field where linebackers cover. And Austin Booker maybe can give the Bears a boost rushing the passer. I don't think it's going to be a significant boost. I don't think Austin Booker is going to show up and suddenly he's going to elevate everyone around there and the Bears defensive front is suddenly going to be able to get pressure. They got no pressure on Geno Smith, and we're fortunate Geno Smith still played terrible football. So that's going to do it for the mailbag. That's going to do it for this Bears banter. We will be back next week as the Bears get ready for Monday Night Football against the Washington Commanders. But the Bears are off this week. So enjoy the bye, kick your feet up, cheer against some NFC North teams, and perhaps the Bears can get one step closer to potentially being a playoff team this season, even though they didn't play a game. We'll talk to you next week. Bear down, everybody. Adios.